All right, welcome back to Sit Reps Steerco's Transition Perspectives. Today we have not career related, but probably more important, discussion about mental health with CJ LeConte. So CJ, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little about what you did in the Army and where you're at now?
Yeah, absolutely. Wyatt, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. I was actually in Wyatt's graduating class out of West Point. Graduated as an infantry officer in 2017. Uh, Went down, to Bullock, Benning for Bullock and Ranger School, and then my first duty station was out at in Fort Carson, Colorado, with the Third Armored Brigade Combat Team, 1/8 Infantry. uh, was a rifle and scout platoon leader out there. Was able to deploy. I put deploy in quotes because I don't know if you consider Camp here in Kuwait for like essentially the entire time. I mean, we were able to go up to Jordan for a bit, but nothing too crazy. And you know, Actually during that deployment, I was really the not to like jump into it now, but that was really the first time that I kind of came face to face with the depths of despair, if you will, of what mental health does to people. One of my privates, I witnessed her suicide attempt, and it was just like an incredibly painful experience to actually come face to face with that as a 24, 23, 24-year-old kid. And that hurt a lot, and actually had three more suicide attempts in our platoon during that deployment. And it was really tough to handle as a leader. But um, getting back from that, I was able to teach ROTC at a historically black college and university in Alabama, Alabama A&M. And I mean, that was just an unbelievable opportunity and experience for me. Being a white kid from Duxbury, Massachusetts, going to an HBCU down south was, something else. Actually, I'm just funny story on that. I don't know, but
Yeah, let's hear it. Yeah.
so I showed up, right. We got back from deployment like late 2019, and then like right early 2020, COVID happened, and just like nothing, was already planning on getting out. Long story short, end up at Alabama A&M in processing in August of 2020, and the socio-political climate in America at that time was challenging. It was like a few weeks after George Floyd's murder, and being a white kid from Duxbury, Massachusetts, on an HBCU campus in the Deep South, that raised some flags, I guess. And I was setting up a PT field and for the morning, the next morning's PT, just laying out cones, and all of a sudden I turn around and there's like four cops, fucking, guns out, like ready to go, like hands, hands, hands. I'm like, dude, what is going on? I'm just trying to do my job here, and get home. I'm not trying to, whatever. But long story short, they got a bunch of calls that a suspicious white male in military fatigues was wandering around an HBCU campus, and they thought that I was like a member of the KKK or a Proud Boy or something coming to shoot up the school. And I mean, it was crazy. I'm able to, we're able to laugh about it now, but at the time it was like pretty nuts. But yeah, and then got out in the spring of 2022. Took the GMAT, and was able to get into Wharton, where I am now, with Wyatt, and are finishing up our second year. So apologize for the lengthiness, but yeah.
No, that's awesome. I think that your perspective is really interesting because, you know, we joke that everyone in the military thinks about one thing in common every single day, and that's getting out of the military.
Yeah.
I don't, I, regardless of who you are, what your position is, which branch you're in. And I think that there's a feeling that, you know, I very much enjoyed being out, but there's kind of this, oh my gosh, like when I get out, that's it, right? I'm going to be
Yeah.
happy. I'm going to find joy. I won't have to go to formation every morning. And I think you show up, especially to somewhere like Wharton, that you've worked very hard to get here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of prestige around it. There's a lot going on. It's very, very social. And you might come face to face with the fact that, you know, you can't just kind of like take your foot off the gas and let yourself down. So would love to hear you talk
Yeah.
about kind of when you first noticed that maybe, you know, as you were getting out, maybe as you came to Wharton, some of those early warning signs that maybe you ignored, and kind of some of that journey that you had, that I think we all struggle with, but that other vets need to be aware of as they're coming down.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think it's such a, to your point, a very tricky battle, um, for us as leaders, in the military. Whether officer or enlisted, it doesn't matter. I think we're all leaders in a way, and it's very challenging in that environment to put your hand up and be like, "Hey, I'm hurting." And it's almost, I think the stigma around mental health has largely been minimized, in the last few years, but I would say it's still relatively prevalent. Um, and yeah, I mean, I first noticed it, when I was in Alabama. Another former soldier, died by suicide, right before I left. Another right when I showed up, another soldier from that unit, passed away like a month after his 20-year-old kid passed away a month after his wife just had a baby girl, which hits hard. Even now, just having my daughter 12 days ago. Um, and really, that hit really, really hard, because I think no matter how far away from you are from your friends, or people you served with, that bond that you develop is pretty unbreakable, and you're really invested, in their well-being. Um, yeah, started having, going back to like that story, from deployment, started having nightmares, of that experience. Uh, didn't want to be on any of the antidepressants that were kind of being, thrown my way um, uh, by the doctors, and so I just started kind of drinking in Alabama, man, and 2 beers a night turned into 3, 4, 5, until it was a lot, 12 with a couple shots, and knew, to your point, I was like, oh, this is a temporary thing. Like, it's going to be, as soon as my ETS date hits, I'm going to be, good to go.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have that. I think it's never like I think with mental health, with all of us, like it's never a one day everything's good, the next day you're like, oh my gosh, you
Yeah.
know, I'm at the depths of despair. I'm heavily drinking, or whatever it might be. That there's various coping mechanisms, right?
Yeah.
Food, drinking, withdrawal. But I think you're right that it's gradual, and you you have these points where, yeah, getting out of the military, getting a job, quitting a job, getting married, like whatever it might be. Once this hits, that's, I'll change then. Um,
Yeah. Hmm.
and
You just keep
that can
kicking the
be
can.
very dangerous, I think, to think
Oh,
that way.
100%. 100%. Yeah. I mean, it's really, over time, right? When you just continually have that negative thought, right? It's almost like a loop that just gets, it speeds up over time. That negative thought pattern repetition, where the the rational, or excuse me, the irrational starts to become rational, and it's a really dark and lonely place to go down that route. I mean, going back to getting out, I thought it was going to be good, right? I was getting married in over the summer. I had just gotten into Wharton. It's like everything should be good, right? And but internally, you're just like crumbling inside. You just feel very alone, and who are you going to reach out to? To the outside world, it looks like you got it all, right? And you can't really be that weak person, um, or I weak person, right? And I think we all go through that. And I mean, upon getting to Wharton, dude, I mean, 5 years as an infantry officer, it's not like you're learning how to, write income statements or whatever, right? You're learning, you're doing other stuff. So when you show up, that imposter syndrome, I think we all have, not just at Wharton, but like getting out and doing anything else. I
You'd
think,
been
yeah,
you'd been an athlete. I mean, to give some of your other background, I mean, you'd see in your background, you have your lacrosse helmet. You've
yeah,
been an intensely competitive person your whole life,
yeah, man.
right? Um, you've never been one, as I think most people that are vets. Most of us are, people that joined the military, operate within the military. Whether it's PT tests or, briefings. There's always kind of a feeling of like, hey, I've got to be the best. I've got to be better. And the idea that you ever might say out loud, mentally, I'm not well. It would be like, you feel like this is like stopping in the middle of a 2 mile run and being like,
Right.
hey, I can't take the PT test, or I'm gonna
Yeah,
walk, right? I mean,
yeah, yeah,
like I think a lot of vets and a lot of people feel, if you make that comparison, like, yeah, the middle of a push-up's just being like, my shoulder kind of hurts, like
yeah.
I'm gonna stop. And like imagine doing that. You'd be
Dude,
made
yeah,
fun of, you'd be,
exactly. Ridiculed.
you know,
Mhm.
and I think a lot of people take that with mental health and think that same way. So
Yeah.
anyway, just to give that background, like so people understand, like you've always been someone that's, you know, been at the top of whatever game you've been playing, right?
I mean, yeah, I don't know what that. That's too kind. I appreciate it, but no, yeah, it's really challenging to put yourself out there, even though it's like you are surrounded, right, by people who love and care and support you, but internally you're just like alone. You don't feel, you're just numb. You're like on an island, just screaming into the echo chamber of your mind, and it's scary, dude. It's a really, yeah, dark and lonely place, especially when you let it fester, and don't have the intestinal fortitude to say something to someone, especially not to get into it, but I think the VA has unbelievable treatment providers if you're able to find them. I think that the infrastructure needs work. We won't go down that path, but like the wait time when I got to the VA in Boston, when I got out for a psychotherapist, was like 5 months. When I got to Philly, it was like 7 months. But hey, here's this SSRI, or here's this, whatever. And it just got to a point, right, where like, hey, I'm doing the things that people are telling me to do. You know what I mean? I'm doing the things that doctors are telling me to do, but I'm still feeling this way. And it's like, it makes you feel even, you feel even
You feel
more.
broken, yeah, and
Yeah,
you think that no one else is feeling that way too, right?
yeah, exactly. Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
But yeah,
yeah, so
man.
you found kind of a um, unique solution that's kind of opened some stuff up for you. Would love to hear this. I think a lot of vets have, have talked about this.
Yeah,
Um, would
yeah,
love to kind of hear you dive into kind of the mechanism by which you have found some relief and like really like changed the way you think, and some of the ways that has now changed mentally how you evaluate things, how you approach life.
yeah, yeah, man. Yeah, I found help through. It was actually when I was in the Philadelphia VA, hospitalized with some negative thoughts, and a doctor there was like, "Hey, have you heard of or tried psychedelics?" And I was shocked. I had no idea that there was any research or anything behind it. Um, and that was all they said though. Like, you should look into it, right? And
Yeah,
and
the VA does not provide psychedelic
no,
treatment.
clinical
uh,
trials you can get. MDMA should be approved, or it did just get fast tracked a few days ago, and but it should be approved uh, August 11th of this upcoming summer. I don't know if the VA is like actually, well, that's a tangent, but it did just get approved, and you can apply for clinical trials if you're struggling, like do that, and there are ways to go,
sure.
uh, but yeah, he didn't tell me anything. right? It was just like, you should look into this. So I did some research, and I mean, mushrooms are readily available. Psilocybin mushrooms are, you know, it's easy to get, if you will, because I didn't know, dude. I had no idea, right? And so I got some, and honestly had an experience not having any idea what I was getting myself into the first time, with my wife, who's an ICU nurse. You know, it was safe, but it just opened up. You know, it made me look at my life from a 30,000 foot view, and look at it objectively for the first time in a long time, and see all of the people around me that care and love and support me. Um, and dude, yeah, it was
Yeah, I
yeah,
th I think what's amazing, and I've talked to some other vets that have gone through something similar. It's not like you had an experience and then just magically you were thinking the same way, but you weren't depressed. You weren't having these like very vicious cycles
yeah,
of thinking. I think what's amazing when I talk to people is it really kind of fundamentally changed the way that they operate, the way that they think.
yeah,
Um, I mean,
yeah,
what were some of the ways that shifted that kind of changed from being, negative to being something more positive?
yeah. Well, I mean, candidly, like, seeing that at the beginning of the journey, and then towards the end, it got a little more negative. Where I did like have, not to get into it, but face the blame and guilt, and all of that you place on your shoulders from the past suicides, right? And doing it in a very unguided, uneducated, without the proper guardrails whatsoever. I had no idea how to process like what was brought up, right? Because
Yeah.
I almost felt worse in that first like 24, 48 hours after, because I just had no idea what to do. Um, and then I just started calling people. Like I was like, finally had the like light bulb, like, hey man, there are so many people who care about you, that are around you, that like want to see you, and would feel so more connected with you if you just picked up the phone and were like, hey, this is what I'm going through, right? Just And I just did that, and had reconnected with my father, and just really went through some stuff with my mom and brother and wife, and close friends. And long story short, months later, I was just doing more digging into the space and into the research, and I essentially like put myself through a course of integration therapy, which is what you're supposed to do following a psychedelic experience. Yeah, and it was just an incredibly profound experience for me, and I'm just so thankful, that I was able to really find like sustained and immediate relief.
Yeah, I think a lot of people that aren't as familiar with psychedelic treatment, I think first they'll think of like a rave, right? Like
Yeah,
that what you're talking about is like, go to the Dead Mouse concert
yeah.
or Rufus to Soul, like
Or
find
go
someone,
down to the jungle or something. Yeah,
right? And just kind of pop acid and like you're good. And I think that because people won't talk about a lot of this stuff, there's people are apt to think like, oh, it's that easy, right?
right.
I just
Yeah,
I just go take some psilocybin or MDMA or ketamine, like whatever it is,
yeah,
and like I'll just be good the next. Like I won't feel bad. Like you said, that's not true. Um, but I think
but
there's some very powerful ways to deal with this stuff that require a lot of work before, during, and then after.
yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah,
what would you tell the people that, might listen and might think like, man, I relate to what you're talking about. I myself am having suicidal ideations or just deeply negative thoughts. And they're stuck in kind of that loop of, feeling bad about feeling bad,
yeah.
attachment.
That's a great way to put it.
How,
Feeling bad.
how would you talk to people and tell them to like, how would you start researching this and find help with this kind of stuff?
dude, yeah. I mean, just jumping back to like the stigma, because I think that even plays a part into the answer of this question. It's like, dude, I didn't want to tell anyone that I did this. It's like you don't want to be labeled that guy. You don't want to be labeled the hippie, right? And if I could change the word of psychedelic, I would. You know what I mean? But I don't have that power.
Yeah,
Um,
people will take SSRIs without a single thought, right?
exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's nuts. There's no such thing as a chemical imbalance in your brain. That's a lie. Like, and but yeah, actually, the linguistic root of psychedelic comes from Humphrey Osmond, which it's the Greek word for psyche or soul, or excuse me, mind, and deline, which is the Greek word for to manifest. And it's together, it means like mind manifesting, which actually makes sense if you think about it. But like
Sure.
that's a you know tangent. But to if you are feeling this way, I mean, there are resources out there. Do not go into to inexperienced, uneducated, or unprepared for whatever substance you do take. There are a plethora of bad actors in the space right now who are you know not trained or qualified to provide this type of treatment. But I would say that I mean, candidly, our company. I mean, I don't know if this is like
Yeah, go ahead. No, we're happy to
but
help. Yeah, please
um,
advertise away.
no, I don't mean to, but I mean, it is like we would love to have this is the community, that this is for. It's we prepare you with three virtual therapy sessions before, one as a group and two as a excuse me, individual calls with a trained therapist and a performance coach, and then there's a
And when
group
you say
based.
trained therapist, this isn't like, I mean, this isn't like you're calling to someone that like has done MDMA a few times and
No,
got a
no,
certification in 3 weeks from like,
yeah,
the hip, like these are I mean, these are medically trained, evidence-based.
clinical psychologist. I don't know if you know Dr. Nate Zinser from West Point. He
Of
was the
course. Yeah.
performance psychology coach there, who like all the sports teams worked with, and
Yeah. The egg
he
chair. Yeah.
yeah, like he's a he is the performance coach aspect, because we're really not just trying to heal people's trauma, right? We're and get them back to baseline. Like we're trying to go from baseline to better, right? We're trying to
Right.
really take advantage of the medicine in a way that you're able to work through your past trauma or past childhood, negative childhood experience, right? And then get to that place where you're loving yourself again, and you feel more like yourself, but then make you a more optimized version of that. So yeah, getting and then there's a group based retreat. I'm still looking for a better word if anyone has any ideas, because I feel like that still carries the stigma. But a group based psilocybin retreat with 8 to 12 participants of other veterans, other MBA vets, whoever. And then it's integrated on the back end with another group session and then two individual coaching sessions.
And
To
what's the name of your company for people that are, interested?
Truxton. Truxton is for those familiar, the locker room back at West Point. I think at West Point, you're just like, you can't hide at all, right? And you can't like go to a place to feel like your authentic self. Um, and for me, like that place that I was able to go and just decompress and get away from the world for a bit was Truxton. And the locker room is no longer there. But I just wanted to really bring that essence, to the world and to people looking
Yeah.
to just like get away from it for a bit. But
Okay.
yes, and I don't mean to like be that
No,
guy,
please, no,
but
this is,
I
I
mean
mean,
it is like
we want people to find help. And like you said, this is a frontier technology. A lot of ways that people can access these therapeutics, really. I hesitate to even say drugs. I mean, that's technically what they are.
right,
Just the same way that an allergy pill is a drug. But people should be careful, right? Because
big
it's
time.
not, it's not like go find some psilocybin, take it, and boom, you're no longer suicidal, you're no longer depressed. Um, there's so much more to it. And if you were to look back, I mean, ideally, someone wouldn't have to get to the point where, maybe these are good things for people to do regardless, right? I don't think there's anyone whose mental health is 100%. But ideally, you'd never have to get to the point, you'd be able to kind of stop these things, stop patterns of thought prior to needing this as a life-saving measure,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
What would you say, like, if you went back to CJ, 2017, 2018, and you were able to put in some interventions and thought patterns, that were easier than just, hey, dude, like go for a walk, right? Like
Yeah,
feel better,
go
stop
for it.
stop feeling
Yeah,
sad,
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
work out
Oh yeah.
more, which are good things. But
Oh yeah. Yeah.
what kind of thought patterns, what kind of ways of thinking would you tell your former self to maybe help you from getting to like the lows that you experienced?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I People love you. You don't need to, dude. I guess I'll answer that with kind of like a story, dude. So like,
Yeah, yeah.
I I always would walk around with like a West Point hat on, or a West Point lacrosse polo, or like a Ranger sweatshirt, and the point of doing that wasn't for like myself because it made me feel good. It was like, hey, world, look, like I'm a worthy person. You know what I mean? It was to like project
Hmm.
out to the world, right? Like, hey, look, like, so because I wasn't comfortable with who I was as a person yet, and I would tell myself that you're great. Just continue following your passion, and stop following what you think other people are going to be proud of you for, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the time we get so wrapped up in like, what's next, what's next, what's next, what's next, what's next, right? We're from West Point, you're just, you're in a very competitive environment, then graduating, and then, it's like, oh, I need to go to Ranger School, and then I need to go and be in a cool unit. I need to go do X, Y, and Z, and then it just continues, and then for what? Like, are you actually happy with the path that you're on? And I'm not saying I wasn't. I'm more so saying, like, if I could go back to that self who graduated West Point, I would tell myself to follow my heart and my passion more, and that people around you love you, and you don't need to constantly feel like you need to prove yourself to them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that's, I mean, it's so hard coming out of the military because, like you said, you just have so many moments where you're like, man, I'm about to like finally get to where I mean, you think about it from West Point, you think about it from the day you go in, right?
Yeah,
And it's hard not to. People talk about, oh, the old grads, right? Or
yeah,
or if you go into basic, people will tell you, my enlisted soldier friends will talk about how people will say, oh, serving in the military will be a big help when you get out. And you can't help but start thinking about that, right? You see graduates or vets that are successful, and learning how to be happy in the moment is is such a crucial thing, and
yeah.
enjoy the journey, right? Um, I mean,
Yeah.
where what would you tell the people, or kind of what are some of the habits now that you formed just day to day that are different than what you had been doing, that have put you in a better spot?
Yeah, I mean, I make more time for my family, and I even my wife and I, or my wife just gave birth 2 weeks ago now. My little girl is 2 weeks old. But we put systems in place almost immediately after that, where it was like, this is protected time during our week. Like, nothing goes on during that time, and we had just been able to connect a lot more. because our relate, I mean, she is an ICU nurse, stud of a person, just unbelievable what she went through during COVID. I mean, that was like 3 years. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Um, so it was really challenging on both of us, and we were both able to sit down and communicate a lot better, and you know, put those systems in place before we had our baby girl. And that was one of the biggest for me. And then um, second would be, I got a routine now where it's you wake up and do a little. I mean, I didn't believe in journaling before, but I journal now in the morning, do some breath work, meditate a little, and I know that sounds right, but it does work. And then yeah, work out and get the day going. And it used to not be that way. So
Yeah.
little things, man, little things just build over time. It wasn't like the drop of a hat, it's like putting something in place, and then the next day it gets a little better and a little better and a little better and a little better. And it's just
I
a
think it's I think it's the same thing, you talk about the way that things deteriorate. And you talked about it was it was one beer every day, then two, then two plus a few shots. And like before long, it's, you know, people can just turn into overeating is one that I've seen people have,
yeah,
alcohol, drug abuse, um, just complete, complete withdrawal. And
yeah,
it's not sudden, right? It's over time to the point that by the time you notice it, it's very difficult to get out of there without the help of someone else.
yeah. Mhm.
So,
Yeah. And that's the
what,
thing, just like you just feel when you get to that point too, you're just like, what's the point of even asking? Right. Because like when you do go to like the VA or you go to someone and you do ask for help and it doesn't work over time, dude, it's just like, what's the point? You know what I mean? And that's the point that's scary that people need to realize when they say that to themselves and immediately reach out to someone because it
so
snowballs.
if people notice themselves there, what would you tell to someone that sees themselves there, that kind of feels like, man, I'm exactly where CJ is talking about? What would you recommend they do?
Reach out to someone, reach out to me. I mean, you call me. I can definitely, given the nature of the industry that I'm in, I mean, yes, I can help you in that regard and educate you on that if that's something you want to do. But reach out to the people around you, reach out to your wife, your mom, your dad, your kids, whoever. People love and care about you. Reach out to the former soldiers. It's about it's people out there do genuinely care about you. You just need to put yourself out there to really experience relief from it. Seriously, they will help you more than anything else.
Yeah. What's the best way to contact you if someone's feeling like, hey, I need to reach out to someone, or if someone, wants to know more about what you're doing and get some
Yeah.
help that way?
CJ at truxtonhealth.com or 339-832-3607. My phone is always open. Shoot me a text that works easy. And um, yeah, that would be more than happy, like absolutely more than happy to help in any way, shape, or form I can.
Yeah, I can verify that CJ will help. He is always looking to improve. I mean, that's the reason you didn't talk about it, but you gave up a very potentially lucrative career um in banking to pursue something very unknown. And I
Yeah.
think a big piece of that was like your own mental health, right?
Oh,
Not to discourage people from pursuing their dream if their dream is to
no.
become an investment banker, but you know, I think another big piece of it was you have a sincere desire, to help other people and to make sure that other people don't have, the problems that you've had in the past. So yeah, feel free to contact us if you're not getting through to CJ. I'll walk up and let him know, like, hey, someone
Yeah.
needs
You're
your help.
probably what, two floors
Um,
below me right now? Yeah.
yeah, we're always open to help. I mean, DM the account, but just telling someone, I think the one big thing I wanted people to know watching this is like, hey, no matter what people are doing, right? there's always someone, there's always something behind what you see.
Yeah.
No matter how much someone's smiling, no matter how much someone is saying that they're good,
Oh yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Um, it's okay to just talk to someone, right? You don't need to go and post it on your social media or like broadcast to everyone, but just tell anyone. And maybe it's just one person, but just
That's
telling
it.
someone and
That's it.
hearing,
It's
hey,
but like to your point, dude, it's one. It's one person, and then it's two, and then it's, you know what I mean? And then you're working your way back up. You're going back up the ladder, and yeah, stop feeling bad about feeling bad. I wrote that was
yeah,
a great quote. So yeah, thank you for that, man.
yeah. Well, and it can happen to the best, right? Like that's the big thing. If you're transitioning and you're at a top school with top job offers, which is where you were, right? You were kind of like, you know, 22-year-old CJ would have been like, wow, that's the dream. Married,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
to a successful, beautiful woman, best job offer, out there, making more money than you'd ever dreamed of at a top school. And it turns out like that's not enough, right? It never would be enough.
yeah,
So, um, you know, people should, understand that prior to. Um, but anyway, CJ, thank you so much. Anything
yeah.
else that you want to, tell people before we sign off?
No, no. And this was more than a pleasure. Like, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This channel helped me get into Wharton. Thank you very much. If you need any help with MBA stuff as well, I love grading MBA essays. I've gotten pretty good at it over the last few years. Or if you need help with GMAT math, I got pretty good at that as well. So
Yeah,
so reach out in that regard, and I'm more than happy to help there too.
100%.
Yeah,
So anyway, thank you again, CJ.
awesome. Thanks, Wyatt.